Uh, right. Welcome everyone to our first day of open topics in the Manila PTG for the Antelope cycle. So today we have a couple of topics to cover, and in the beginning of the week we had a good Z cycle retrospective. So if you haven't managed to participate because you had a schedule conflict and so on, you could get back to our YouTube channel, and the recording should be posted there anytime this week. So this week of the PTG. So if you'd like to, please take a look there. But today we will start talking about the proposed topics by the community, and we have a couple of things to cover. So yeah, it's good to have you here, and I hope we have productive PTG week and that we do good things over this week. So the first topic we have for today is different approaches for the images we use in our jobs, and the honors are Gotham and myself. So Gotham, would you like to start?
Hello, yes. All right. Hoping I'm audible. Um, cool. Yeah, this has come up a few times in the past, and most recently because we had to update the Manila test image in our environments. As you all know, Manila test image is built from this project called Manila Image Elements, and it's a disk image builder based project. So technically, we take a base image. It could be Ubuntu, it could be CentOS, um, uh, and we kind of add some elements onto it that we care about. And in this case, these are things that pertain to the use that we're putting that image to. This is a community curated image, so that can be used for two purposes. One, it could serve as the generic driver's share server image. So we call that a service image. So if you're using the generic driver, you know that the share server in that case is coming from a Nova instance, and the Nova instance has some packages inside already inside baked into it, such as the NFS server in this case, or the CIF server in case you're using CIFs and so on, and of course some SSH tightening and some pre-filled stuff that's baked into that image as well. And we use the same image as our test image just out of convenience. And for the longest time, this has been the Ubuntu image, and we've picked an LTS release, and we've always had, like, a completely skinny, as skinny an image as possible. And until, of course, Ubuntu's own requirements started getting bigger and bigger. One of the things that happened in the Jammy release, Ubuntu 22.04, is that the minimum RAM got bumped up, and the disk was that we were using, the disk flavor we were using before, which was 3, I think, 3 gig, was no longer sufficient. And so, I mean, bumping up these things, and of course, I mean, each test VM ends up consuming 1 vCPU, um, at least. This kind of gets us to the borderlines of what's capable in our CI system, right? So um, if you imagine running the generic driver job that is creating multiple share servers with the same image, you could imagine there are share servers that are being spawned off because there are tests running, and these tests themselves are are creating VMs wherein they're going to go try to mount a share or to write into a share or so on. And some of the tests create multiple VMs and so on. So technically, we run a dev stack host, which is probably paravirtualized, and it is running a handful of VMs at the same time. And this causes some issues, such as, like, I mean, if you run out of resources in these test jobs, it shows up as different things each time. And the first things you'll probably notice is the VM takes forever to boot, and this could be either the I mean, if it's a generic driver job, it could be the share server that's taking forever to boot, and so shares are ending up in an error state. Or it could, if it's a test VM, that is something that the Manila test plugin, Tempest plugin spawns. These just take forever to boot and to be SSHable. So many spurious failures. And besides, of course, like if you're running out of memory, these are hogging on the DevStack's host itself. And the host, when it runs out of memory, starts giving you issues with RabbitMQ, with the database connections and so on. So service failures as well. So it's getting harder and harder to debug these because you take a look at the failure and then you work backwards into which service um, had this. More often than not, it's Nova, taking a while to boot up this VM. I mean, meaning libvirt is is spawning the VM, but probably not. I mean, the VM is not booting fast enough for SSH that our tests are expecting. But otherwise, sometimes you will see these database failures as well, randomly cropping up and affecting Manila, affecting Neutron, and so on that we consume. So it's getting more painful as we progress. That's the gist of it. And there is, as you all know, the level of investment with the generic driver is so that we can use it as the reference driver and as a test, um, system. There is probably no, we don't have any plans, at least, to advance it by, you know, trying to improve on the backing image for it, because you could practically be using anything in your cloud, and we really don't want to start shipping the image that you must use. Although a lot of deployments choose to use the Manila service image that we produce, there is no necessity to do that. We've documented what it is that the VM must already have in order to be the VM image must already have in order to boot as a share server. Um, but when it comes to the tests, we have little choice, right? So we expect that the tests have whatever clients they're supposed to have. They are SSHable by using a Manila user, um, and there's some sort of a preceded key that the tests are capable to create. But if you really want to rescue, like maybe you have password authentication as well and stuff. So there are some requirements in the test image that we've taken for granted because we start shipping the service image. And as far as I know, a lot of people that are running the Manila scenario tests in their CI systems or locally are ending up using these service images that we produce. Um, yeah, so I guess we were just trying to brainstorm here. What do we do going forwards? For one, right now, I think on all the stable CI, we currently have a focal foci image, which is kind of it's a skinnier test image. But on Z and forwards, we're using the Jammy image, which is forcing us to reduce the test concurrency right now, and we're running with a concurrency of 1. And if you've been looking at these jobs long enough, you know that a concurrency of 1 could stretch up test runtimes by, I mean, close to at least an hour more than concurrency of 4 or concurrency of 8 that we like to run the tests with. But a high concurrency is not possible, again, because we don't want to starve the host of resources. And so when you turn down the concurrency to 1, you're waiting longer for CI to complete its jobs and stuff. And maybe that's okay. But if you're in a time crunch, maybe this is feature freeze, etc., then it starts to matter. So yeah, we were looking at some alternatives, and here are some of those. And I was basically trying to get them here, so we can kind of avoid these alternatives and kind of ask if there's something we should be doing that we are not looking at yet. Uh, and the first alternative is that we start running these scenario tests that are running into these resource issues. We start running them periodically instead of per commit. Um, and we've resisted from doing this. It's mostly because the one thing that a periodic job is usually ignored. Um, I mean, unless you have some sort of a designated person or some sub team that's looking at these periodic jobs and kind of triaging them from time to time. At least we've had no experience running a periodic job on this team where uh, we're we're kind of always looking at failures and proactively working on them, especially at the rate of that these scenario tests fail with, say, something like the generic driver. um, it might soon become overlooked. That's the downside of that. But of course, reading these scenario tests out of the API jobs and separating the API tests and maybe the RBAC tests or something, you end up with a faster, leaner CI. And another thing that we could do is we could invoke these tempest tests, these scenario tests on demand, such as if we think that there's something wrong with it, sorry, there is something we can gain by running scenario tests on a particular patch, we can have an incantation that probably kicks off another queue. I mean, this could be the experimental queue, this could be something else we define, that Zool runs for us. Um, but then again, the downsides of that is it's a manual process. Either the author or a reviewer has to decide when it is appropriate to run these tests, and maybe this will help us land smaller batches faster. But if you're trying to qualify anything that's functionally changing any driver, and you want to make sure that it's not breaking something, you will want to run the scenario tests. Um, so that's kind of the conundrum here. And yeah, and again, it is going to be easier to overlook failures at that time as well, because we've invoked something that may not vote. It might just present the results to us, and it's up to us to take a look, triage any failures and stuff. And of course, the other thing about these infrequent test running is if you have a bug in the Tempest plugin, you won't know until you called uh, these test jobs, right? Whether that's periodic or manually triggered. And uh, the third alternative, which we've started resorting to of late, is running scenario tests in different jobs. So technically, we take out the scenario tests, we run API and whatever other tests that we want in two different jobs, and which the downside of this is that we explode the number of jobs, multiply by that by two usually, because I think almost all of the first party drivers that we are maintaining CI for, we're running scenario tests on them. Um, and I mean, of course, less spurious failures, it's an easier triage. Um, you reduce the total time that it takes to run the tests. The CI is a little bit faster than running with concurrency one in the same job. Nothing else against this apart from, way too many jobs. Nobody's asking us to cut down on those, but it feels a little much. And we have had a suggestion in the past to try and use a much skinnier image than Ubuntu. And that's always been an area of investigation that we've not gone too far out to pursue. I mean, one thing was to use build root and create our own test image, something like Ceros, which is pretty popular in the OpenStack land because it is so lightweight and things seldom fail because your image failed to boot, right? Uh, and so you could build something like that with bake in whatever it is that we are currently baking in with image elements. The issues with that is, I mean, some of the things that we might end up baking in we have to take from the Linux kernel directly, and they could be pretty unstable. That's where we kind of have the current effort. It's called the Manila test image. It's a repository that we've not like cared for the last, I don't know, a couple of years now, I think, since we stopped investigating down that path. But of course, we were trying to do two things with one thing over there, which is we were trying to have a really cool test image for the really cool image for the generic driver alongside having a test image. That was what we were chasing down at that point. And the final thing, which I kind of feel is a little more hopeful for us, is can we change the approach altogether? Can we stop using VMs for all of our tests and probably rely on something as more lightweight, such as containers, and probably mount shares directly on hosts on containers running on the DevStack host. And or you could even do this with running a skinny version of Kubernetes on top, although that'll introduce a dependency on Manila CSI, and it's usually, I mean, it's going to become like a chicken and egg problem, because if you have a bug in Manila that will affect the CSI, then you first go fix that because it's part of your test infrastructure and so on. But yeah, so these are some of the things Carlos and I were brainstorming over the past release, and just bringing it out here for the community to kind of get an understanding of what the CI is evolving like. We might pursue one or more of these, and the easiest thing to pursue for us would be to break the test jobs into scenario tests and API tests, which we have done in some cases. We haven't yet finished that effort. Like this FFS CI, for instance, needs that sort of a fix, I think, to kind of give it a little more breathing room in terms of resources. But then, the wish list item would be to try and evolve the tests so we don't run into this problem, and it's a more long-term fix. And you might ask, why is it that we can't run on a bigger DevStack system? We've tried going down that path as well. Nodepool and the Open Infra CI is not capable of giving us a bigger CI system. That's just the way CI is across OpenStack. The only way to scale is to actually have multiple test nodes if we want it. So we create a multi-node job. I'm not too sure that'll help a lot with this. I mean, maybe increasing the number of compute nodes will definitely have an impact. You can run more VMs. We could go down that path as well. Feels a little like every single job will end up having two nodes when we are running scenario tests. That would be the thing with that. All right, I'll stop talking now. But
well, thanks for the detailed information. And as I mentioned, like there are some alternatives. I think the first two alternatives, which are run scenario tests periodically or run them on demand, it's easy for us, like as reviewers or like even the change owners, to forget to run. So that could lead us like to forget running those tests in a change, and then with that we wouldn't get catch a bug. For the short-term solution, the implementation we did to run scenario tests in different jobs, it works. And we could start like drafting a long-term solution, which would be like some of these two alternatives here, like rethinking the scenario testing, for example, creating like these questions you ask, like, can we use containers? Can we use the host as a test instance? I think this would be like good long-term solutions. For now, the generic driver is the one that caused us like the most problems, because there are some other jobs running scenario tests, but the generic driver was the one that we've seen more issues. But I was also thinking about that. I mean, the when we switched from Ubuntu 20 to 22, we saw like the need to get more resources to the VM because the VM wouldn't even boot up. So and the CI is going to change as well for the other projects. So there is a goal for this cycle, which is to migrate all of the test nodes like that we're using Ubuntu 20 to 22. And I mean, if that happens, and that will happen because I mean that's a goal and usually happens in time, then we might see more people struggling with Ubuntu 22 as well, because even like the CI nodes could also consume more resources. So if that happens, I think there's a chance that some people will make some noise, and the images could like grow in size. I mean, we could get get started a conversation with OpenInfra to get bigger CI flavors, like only for the CI jobs, like the regular ones we run with DevStack, and that would be something. But that's only something that I have in my head now, considering that I mean, when we switched it from Ubuntu 20 to 22, that's when we saw some issues, and that could happen like in the upstream CI, like like the entirety of it. So I don't know if that will happen, but if that happens, I think it would be like something that we will start to like hear soon from other projects as well. Yeah, it's I like these two approaches here. We can maybe keep talking about them. Sorry, you're going to talk about something.
No, it just makes the problem a little more urgent, right? And that's the flavor of things. Even, I mean, we're probably going to talk about this FFS CI tomorrow, and them upgrading the test infra to the next version of the operating system would mean that we need packages, and we don't have those in case of FFS. And secondly, it's consuming more resources than the prior version was. Yeah,
Yeah.
which makes this sort of a effort more urgent. Yeah, I think we should just probably prototype something by and see if how that works. I'm not sure what the pushback will be from the Tempest folks as far as running tests without Nova in the picture. Um, you know, over here, I mean, one of the things that we'd say around here is the fact that each of these test jobs is turning out to be an integration test on all of OpenStack, uh, which, if you have a failure in some component, is ending up affecting Manila CI and preventing us from merging it in patches. So yeah, I guess we probably have to discuss this in upcoming weekly meetings and check on status. I can get started on prototyping some of these things, but you're right, like the immediate thing that we can do if Ubuntu 22.04 becomes the default and CI is randomly failing on us, is to start splitting the jobs, and and the long-term solution would be to find find a better way to do this.
Yep. I agree. And sure. Thanks for picking up like the thing to mention on it on the future upstream meetings as well. I think we already, like, as the images are already available for us to consume them, and we already saw some failures like in the Ceph jobs and so on, we could already start like the tests also and take a look like at the generic, like do a couple of rechecks and see if the generic driver job would fail more like then it is failing right now. So yeah, that's something we can already start like looking on and already start like raising our hands if we see if it's gonna be like a pain for us.
Yeah, makes sense.
Awesome, thanks. Is there something else you'd like to bring up for this topic? Or questions from the audience?
I do have one question.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Vida. I can ask later.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with the infrastructure, the CI infrastructure, but I was just wondering if it's possible to have like a VM cluster, so a dedicated sort of desktop or host that actually just hosts the VM, and they get reserved by the job. So the VM or the instances are basically spawned on those desktops, and the resources are used external to the current desktop. Is that something that might be another alternative? That'll basically offload this extra resources from the primary desktop that runs the job.
So we'd be wiring up this. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Continue with
VM cluster. Yeah. A lot of infrastructures use clusters that are external to the main agent, and they get basically attached to the main agent on demand when the job runs. So I'm wondering if that kind of environment can be supported in this infrastructure.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm not sure that's possible with CI. I mean, we should check if Nodepool has something like that, where we could, have, maybe all we care about then is like there is an IP address of something that we can access into and do some tests, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be something we can investigate. The other thing would be the networking, right? Between these VMs, we want to be able to take a share that's originating in the dev stack that's being tested and mount it on something else, and which means that we would have to somehow bridge
Have
these two
access to
VMs.
Exactly, have access to it, so they have to basically be on the same network substrate, or substrate, yeah, connectivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
the approach, like one approach is to multi-node job, break down the job, or this other approach is to dedicate a special server for those extra resources, because in future, if let's say the future Ubuntu image requires more resources, then we have to keep like thinking how do we address it. This will just offload, have a VM cluster or some cluster out there that we can connect to as part of the infrastructure, and it will be like an extension to the deployment.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, it sounds a lot like the multi-node thing to me, because over there networking gets easy. You're put on the same private network, and you can. I mean, we would still have to figure out how we could, for example, in case of Ceph, figure out how we could transfer secret keys and stuff to the other part of your job and stuff. So yeah, we can think on those lines. I'll talk to you about this stuff, but if you have thoughts, please add them to this stuff so we can follow up.
Sure.
These notes. Thanks, Vida.
Thank you, Vida. Hey, Victoria, did you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, so my question is, and I don't know if it was covered, but I know that there are projects that actually have higher requirements on resources for the nodes in CI. Like I'm thinking, for instance, at the O project. I don't know if we had got some feedback from them on how we can, make our jobs a bit lighter, or which is their approach in building the environments they need to build.
that is a yeah. We should probably ask them, because Diplo CI, I think, is going to be the most complicated CI there is in Open Infra. So I'm sure they
Yeah.
would have run into problems like this and kept evolving solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
worth,
Triple O needs
worth checking.
way more resources, I think. So if maybe they have pointers to, I don't know, some sort of node that we can use that would be a bit beefier, so we can give more resources to the jobs we need to run, or some way of structuring tests in a way that, you know, we can roll things in parallel or anything. I don't know, just brainstorming on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks. That's a good idea. We can ping them and see what they are doing to handle with issues like this, like increasing resources and getting the beefier machines. Okay. Yeah. Is there any other question? I think we are running a bit late to the next topic, but yeah, I think I can do some adjustments at the agenda. All right. Thank you for the input. We can follow up on the action items we have for this one. I'll properly mark those as action items for this topic, and we can go on to the next topic. I think I see Kiran here. So next topic is share backup from Kiran. Kiran, floor is yours.
Okay, so basically share backup is something was proposed by someone earlier, and I had found a spec as well as the sample implementation of share backup, and I want to extend and consider this for the next release, the upcoming releases. So what we want to achieve is basically the functionality that exists in Cinder, that is volume backup. We want to replicate same here for the share, and want to provide the support in the same way with various backup drivers, most probably Swift, NFS backup. So there exists a spec, like if you click on this spec, I have updated the spec, keep it minimalistic regarding what is expected in backup and what are the APIs we should expect in the initial implementation. And accordingly, the implementation or the pull request in Manila. This spec initially had some additional stuff such as backup policies, like automatic backups over periodic times and etc. However, I have updated and removed those things just to have a clean and minimalistic spec, which should possibly get accepted as early as possible.
Great. Thank you for restarting this spec. Yeah. I was looking into this spec a few days ago, but yeah, using the Cinder solution seems like a way to do something that could be like implemented around. So it's already implemented around other projects. So yeah, and it's kind of also validated. We just need to take a look at the spec and see the details. Some more reviewers would be useful. I see that there are some there is a part here for operators question. Was this from? Yeah, I think these were already responded or not. Yeah.
Yeah, so by means of backup, we want to provide something which is not there in terms of snapshot, like a backup across the region or across the availability zones, and also like the full backup and the incremental backup. So at least in the initial spec, I assume we should be able to do the backup of the share, and then we can have additional feature thereafter, like a backup of snapshot and then incremental backup, and then also a metadata uh, for the backup.
So, new question. This is still being built on top of the data service, right? So you're going to have a driver interface for the data service, from what I understand.
Yeah. So we
Awesome.
can, the sample implementation would be the data service potentially using NFS backup, and then we can have additional backup drivers. For example, the Cinder uses chunk driver, which will kind of divide data into several chunks and upload them to the Swift.
Yeah, I think you're right that the initial spec tried to do too much, and this looks like a more achievable part.
Yeah, the reason of raising this here to at least get approval from the API point of view, and then we can extend this to various driver implementation. We potentially will also consider to have a backup provided by the NetApp itself, right? I mean, in addition to a backup to various container-based solutions, you can also do a backup which is provided by the third-party driver.
So would such a backup be driven by the data service? Like, is that going to be a different driver, or will it be part of the share manager interface where you're like asking?
Oh, yeah, I think that will be a part of share manager interface.
Okay.
The one that does backup by manually copying the data in chunks will be part under the tree of data drivers. Otherwise, the the actual backend specific share drivers will consider implementation under the driver or the share manager, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah, this looks like a pretty good evolution for the data service. I mean, the only thing I would say is, I mean, you may have already looked at the migration interfaces. We've gone through a few iterations with share migration, where we've evolved like the data service interfaces to make sure that it works for DHSS true, DHSS false, works for scenarios where we need some sort of a user mounting a share, and we might potentially have permission issues and things like that. So there are some configuration options. There's some code in the migration interfaces themselves, including the way to to if a job is not done, how do you end up restarting that job, and also to verify, have you done the data copy properly, which is there some checksum that we can check, etc. So we've kind of thought of different problems that can happen when copying data from a place to another. So I would suggest taking a look at those if you have not already, in terms of like, you know, these new interfaces that you're introducing. And for the most part, most of them will look the same, right? Like, so the NFS backup driver could use some of the code
Yeah,
that's
so
already there.
the existing, like the implementation that I have in the pull request is using for the NFS backup driver, and it is using the code from the data part itself, where it
Nice.
copies. I mean, it uses the existing function for the NFS.
Cool. Awesome. I've not paid attention to this spec because I presume you were working on it and evolving it, but yeah, I'll take a look at this.
Yes, me
Give you
too.
some review comments.
Just one question. What is the goal for this spec and this development to the next release cycle? Or just want to approve this to the Antelope and starting developing this on the next DB cycle? What is the idea for this, Kiran? What is your plan? This is a kind of urgent request, or have time to discuss about this?
Yeah, so basically with this spec, there is a pull request in parallel for the implementation. But I don't want to kind of update the pull request again and again. So want to formalize on the spec first, and then I can extend the remaining part into the pull request. The pull request itself initially contain the implementation of NFS backup driver. So as a part of approval, I will extend it to Swift.
As a part of extension, you mean like, you know, that's not part of this spec, right? It's you've only proposed.
Yeah, I only propose API and how it should be done in the spec. The actual driver implementation will be, I don't know. It can be another spec or bug, like blueprint or the bug.
Makes sense. But if I understand Felipe's question correctly, he's asking if it's all doable in this cycle. Is that the question, Felipe?
Yeah, if that's the question, I think the initial implementation should possible to do in this cycle, the next one, Antelope.
I see.
I think there was also a question if it's an urgent, to give a bit more perspective. It is urgent. We have customers who are using Cinder backup and they want to do the same for Manila. And this is why, we would be happy to kind of speed up on that if the spec is approved. I'm pretty sure we can get implementation according to spec done very shortly after.
Right. And I saw that the idea is to rely on multi-snapshot feature, right? At least from what I read now. So the NFS pickup driver would create a snapshot, allow access to the snapshot, and mount the snapshot, right? That's the flow.
Correct. The same way that Cinder does, by the way.
But so the driver must have the ability to mount snapshots. They share snapshots, right? In Cinder, we're talking about block storages, so you're mounting block snapshots. But here we are talking about file snapshots. And from what I see on the Manila driver support matrix, multiple snapshots, something that only Hitachi, I think, supports this, and LVM. No. Yeah, just those three drivers. Most drivers don't support multiple snapshots. I'm saying about NetApp because I think NetApp doesn't support multiple snapshot. So how would you, so to support this, is it required the multiple snapshot feature?
Yes, the NFS with this basic driver implementation, it is required, but again, the vendor-specific implementations can be different, and that's the whole idea that we have the same kind of stable API, and then the drivers could approach the backups slightly different, yeah. And the basic backup driver might only support a few few backends, and as for the vendor specific stuff, that already depends how to implement it.
I got it. Just one question, does Cinder have a specific service for backups, or it runs in the data service? I think Cinder, no, if Cinder has a data service. Anyone know?
Cinder has a Cinder backup service as far as I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, like separate service.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We can like the action item for this would be for the reviewers to get back to this spec and review it and provide some feedback. The spec deadline is still a bit far away, but that gives us enough time to review everything. So, yeah. Yeah, the spec freeze for us, we haven't yet proposed because we usually do that after the PTG when we decided the dates for like the bug swatches and so on. But it would be something like before, like at least 1.5 months before the feature freeze, as it has been. Like, for example, in this case on Z, it was kind of, yeah, almost 10 weeks before the feature freeze, or 10 weeks before the feature freeze. So it's going to be something like on those lines. So yeah, that will give us reviewers some time until the deadline, so we can take a look at the spec. And but the sooner we can get some feedback, the better.
Awesome. I tried to take a look on the spec and provide some feedback.
Awesome. I see some discussion in the comments as well.
Sorry, I missed last 5 minutes. There was some network glitch. Are we still in the same topic, or?
Yes, we are. There's been like some items of discussion, and Felipe asking some questions about if about Cinder and so on, those were addressed already, but there's a discussion going on the chat now, like at least a point raised by Haxing. He's mentioning that like his opinion about this, that we should not allow backup to restore other shares besides the original share. So this would be easy to misoperate and lead to the destruction of other share data, but we could allow to create new shares from the backup. And yeah, Gotham was agreeing with this and saying that the original share could be gone by the time that registrar is useful. And Hexing also mentioned that if the original share has been deleted, then only can restart to the new share. So yeah, it's a good point. It's something that we can take to the reviews as well. I was mentioning that we do not have like the in the schedule yet the dates for spec freeze, but it should be something around like 10 weeks before the actual feature freeze for the release. But the idea is that the reviewers will get to the specs like as soon as possible to get some feedback, and we can have like a good number of interactions and tackle some things that may show up and answer some questions there. So yeah, thanks for proposing the topic and also for working on this. This is it sounds like a very valuable feature. We will as reviewers take a look at the spec and provide some feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Are there any other questions around this topic? Okay, I'll take silence as a no. So we are like a bit 5 minutes out, like over in our schedule, but I think we can afford to have the 5 minutes break now, and then we would get back to our 4 minutes break, I think. So it will like round out the numbers. So the next topic is secure bug changes, and yeah, it's Gotham, Liron, and Vida. So we'll be back in 4 minutes. Okay, let's get back to our regular agenda. So the topic now is secure bug changes. Gotham, Liron, and Vida. Floor is yours.
Hello. Okay, cool. So again, this is going to be a recap of things that's happened so far, just to get folks all on the same page. So what's the goal that we're trying to solve? One is that we've had a default RBAC for a long time, but there it has had some issues, such as the fact that it is not consistent across services, and that if you are trying to run on a cloud, there isn't default personas that were completely usable, apart from a wide admin persona and a regular member persona. And so folks wanted to have like some wanted to have consistency across all of the services, and kind of pushed for this effort in Keystone to create some default personas that clouds could rely on, so that some common overrides could be avoided. And that the second part of this goal was to try to make policy more granular. For one, in Manila, we have a context as admin policy, which is kind of, we sprinkle it all over the place. We're like, okay, so this run requires an admin, let's just use a context as admin policy. So it's stuff like that. And of course, the other demand as part of consistent policies was also to create a read-only persona, and that was with the help of a role called reader. And the final thing was to try and create an admin persona, which is not really as overarching and capable like the current legacy admin that we're used to. We wanted to have an admin that we could delegate some of the admin tasks to, but perhaps be scoped only to that particular project and so on. So in the Wallaby cycle, Manila refreshed all of the default RBAC policies for every single API, huge change. And so the new defaults that we were talking about included support for scopes. You could operate at system scope and at project scope, and our legacy administrator persona in Manila became an admin persona, which is somebody that has a role admin operating at system scope. So unless you had a token that you would go get for this particular persona, you wouldn't be able to do certain things like creating pools, listing pools, creating share types, manipulating share types, and many such things that you currently do as an administrator in Manila. And then we used a project scoped administrator. That is, scope is project, role is admin, and allowed certain actions to be performed by such an administrator, right? And such as resetting the status of a share, syncing a replica on demand, and force deleting some resource and stuff. So a small number of things that were only affecting a particular project and not the entire cloud. That was the idea. And we introduced a reader persona by default at both the scope system and project, such that you could do read-only operations, such as I just want to read the list of pools. I just want to see the share type extra specs. I just want to view only the share servers, the share instances, and so on. So those were defaulting to the reader role, and these were implied roles in the sense that if you are an administrator, such as somebody that has the role admin, you could do everything that the admin could do, and also everything that the member can do, and everything that the reader can do. That was the idea. So you would be able to build on top of each of these roles. So the reader being the least privileged role in these new defaults. And one of the things we did in the Wallaby cycle is we introduced these defaults, but we didn't turn them on. We kind of had a configuration option, or rather two configuration options. One is so that users could sign up to enforce scope. This was brand new for folks, so we wanted to make sure that it works, continues to work as before. So unless you said enforce scope equals true, we wouldn't do a scope check. Such as, are you using a scope token? Are you operating at the system level, or are you operating at a particular project level, and so on. And we didn't even enforce the new defaults that required you to turn on yet another configuration option. So Manila would just work as it was in the prior releases before you upgraded to Wallaby, for instance, unless you signed up to use these new defaults, which is kind of confusing, right? Like, they're called the new defaults, but they're not in effect. And so we took a couple of cycles to kind of try to see how this works with the operators. So folks that wanted to experiment with it and trying to see, I mean, these are pretty massive changes. And we did get some feedback as a community, though, not just within Manila. And part of the feedback was the ability that operators had in the past. They had already gone ahead and overridden a lot of these policies, and they had created applications and automation that was using certain personas. Like, for example, I would use a particular user and create a bunch of resources. But now, as we start granulating these policies in different services and try to say, okay, only system admins can do this, whereas system admins cannot do something else, right? For example, you should not be a system scoped administrator when you're trying to create a resource, because that's kind of silly because you don't really have a project identity. Where does that resource get namespaced to? Right. So if you were trying to manage a share and you're a system administrator, we don't know which project you want to manage that share into, because that's not part of the token at all. And so the API had to change for something like that. So there were issues such as these that operators pointed out. And operators also said that, there was no straightforward way to adopt the scope itself, such as the application users had to be manipulated. One is when you start dividing these APIs, the application itself probably had to evolve to say, okay, use this user when doing these actions, use this other user to when you're doing this other actions. And the other thing was, if you were to use scope, you had to use it only against certain projects, because and when I say projects in this case, I mean OpenStack services APIs, because Cinder APIs and Glance APIs would not support scope, whereas or rather would not support system scope, whereas Manila, Ironic, Nova, etc. would support system scope. So if you have a cloud where you're operating with different services, it's a nightmare. Like you wouldn't want to do this at all. So that was the couple of operator feedback items. And besides that, we had some other issues. One is that the system scoped reader never really worked because we had context checks in the database that were preventing access to somebody that didn't have a project ID. And if you were operating at the system scope, you would never have a project ID because you're operating across projects. So that didn't work as expected. And you could, with Manila, we never prevented the system admin to create resources, which was a big problem, because if you could end up creating a share and the share would have no project ID assigned to it, because the token that the system admin is using does not have a project ID. So, and then we didn't have support in Manila client to use system scope. We didn't have cloud profiles. Is something that the OpenStack client does that Manila client can't do, and so on. So we had some issues going into the future cycles after Wallaby, and so we had a change of heart, change of direction, motivated by this feedback in the Z cycle. I won't bore you with too many of the details. There is a spec and which clearly calls out what changed, but to be concise about what changed for Manila, here's the deal. We dropped the need for any sort of system scoped actors in the default RBAC in Manila. So we still are changing the default RBAC rules. So if you are in a release that's older than Wallaby, and if you're trying to jump onto a release that is Z and beyond, the default RBAC will look different. And it is still opt-in, but we are starting to you consume the reader role. That was one of the big asks, and so all of the read-only APIs, such as give me a list of something, give me show me this particular resource, etc., those will default to the reader role. And we would also retain the legacy administrator, but this administrator has scope. So technically, it's kind of confusing. We call this an administrator, but think of it as nothing changed for the administrator role. You can still operate across projects, and you would just assign the user that you want as an administrator the role admin, and that's all Manila needs to consider that particular user and that particular token as an admin token, and allow them to perform any of the administrator actions in Manila. So part of this change, we lost the ability to delegate some of these tasks to another role or a persona by default, and that is coming. That's the only thing that we kind of discussed in Z as something that is pending in the future cycles. And apart from these changes, so it's going to be a far easier ramp for operators for sure to take on these changes to enable this in their clouds when they upgrade to Z. And hopefully it's more useful than the existing RBAC, as in they don't really need custom overrides if this is all they were trying to do. That is, have a reader persona and have an administrator persona that's meaningful. But yeah, let me get to the future in just a sec. But besides these, we started adding some testing. So we had a patch that added CRUD tests. At least all the CRUD APIs were covered for share snapshots, share types, scheduler stats, and share networks. And we ensured that the default RBAC that's shipping when these options are enabled is actually working as we expected. And these tests are in the Manila Tempest plugin. What else? Yeah, what needs to happen in Antelope and beyond? Well, one is since we lost the ability to be able to delegate something by default, by the virtue of default RBAC, that is something we've got to work on in the future. And I'm not sure that's going to be something that'll be ready in the Antelope release, but it might be in the B release. And that's because this manager role is sorry, bad way to introduce it. We're introducing yet another role by default. It's called manager. And then this is coming from Keystone. So Keystone will bootstrap. When you execute the Keystone bootstrap command, it will create manager as yet another role. And you could assign it to certain users in your cloud that need to have some admin powers, but not overarching admin powers across all of the projects. So a project scoped manager will be able to do certain things, such as the actions that are listed on this Etherpad, such as resetting the status of a share, force deleting a share, and doing the same thing with replicas, but also be able to resync a replica, promote an out of sync replica, and do status updates on snapshots, status updates on share networks, share group snapshots, and so on, and force deleting these resources and things. So these will default to a project manager in the near future. Once we're done, once Keystone is done introducing this manager role and we're ready to consume it. And that should alleviate some of the things in a multi-tenant cloud. You could actually designate some users as managers and not really consult an administrator for these actions at least. Or maybe if you're interested, you end up using the manager role for further APIs. And that's the kind of feedback that the community needs as well. So if there are APIs here that we have not considered that could be delegated to a project scoped manager, let us know, because this stuff is still brand new and evolving. And another action for the future is Keystone will work on a service role, and this will help us with inter-service communication. So when Manila is talking to Nova, Neutron, Glance, Cinder, and other OpenStack services, it needs a user to do so. And that user right now is an administrator user. That's what's required, because we do certain actions and we want to be able to see a lot of information from these services. So we end up requiring that the service user is an admin user. It has the role admin. And that's kind of weird also, because it's a wide gamut of things that the service user can do. And so if somebody gets access to the service user somehow, they can wreak havoc in the cloud. And so I mean, the evolution to this would be to try and isolate certain things that services want to do and kind of pull them all together so that we can tell Nova, hey, here's a bunch of things that Manila is trying to do, and we'd like for your default RBAC to consider a Manila service user. And believe it or not, a lot of the interactions between services is very similar. So if we are trying to create ports in Neutron, Ironic's trying to create ports in Neutron as well. If we are trying to create volumes in Cinder, there's some other service that's creating volumes in Cinder the same way as we are, and so on. So if there are some administrative actions that we're taking, it's possible to put them all down and isolate those APIs to allow access by default to a service role, so that in deployments you can scope down the service users and give them a much less capable but useful role called service. Again, this is not something Keystone supports today. Manager is not something Keystone supports today. So I'm assuming, and I was looking at the Keystone PTG notes, and I think they're working towards supporting these two things in this cycle, which might allow projects like Nova, Manila, and so on to implement this starting this cycle or going into the next cycle, so the earliest we might see this is in the B cycle. So we might talk about this again. But for now, if you're an operator or if you are a contributor that actually wants to see some API, be considered for this sort of delegation. We don't really need a system level administrator or something like that to do some action. Please let us know, because we could be thinking of those right from the get-go when we introduce support for this manager role by default RBAC. So let me jump back into what's happening in this cycle. So one is we've had some tests thanks to Vida and Liron working a lot on these Tempest tests over the whole of this cycle, but it is not all of it, right? We knew getting into the effort that Manila has some 200 odd APIs, and each of these has to be tested in different combinations against different roles. I shouldn't, as a regular reader, be able to create a share or create any resource for that matter. I shouldn't be able to perform an administrator action if I'm a member. If I'm a user with a member role or a reader role and so on. So there are a lot of negative tests as well as positive tests, such as I should not be prevented from doing this sort of tests and so on. We call this wide gamut of tests as protection tests. And we started writing a lot of those in Tempest, and we need help in adding a whole lot more. They look a lot similar, but they are a lot in number. So which is where I think if we have more helping hands, we can get done with it much faster. And the other part of this is, and this is completely on me, is the fact that we don't yet have the unit tests merged. And the biggest blocker here was that we have multiple ways we're testing RBAC in our unit tests. One is we're writing custom RBAC rules and kind of restarting the API engine that is actually shared across different threads. And which means that if you're trying to test the defaults and customs at the same time, you're going to have spurious failures because they're probably running parallelly, and they're gonna end up breaking each other unexpectedly. So one thing could be we could start running these RBAC tests in their own kind of tox target and their own job, or we could end up doing two separate executions within the same tox target. First finish the unit tests and then probably pick up the RBAC tests and so on. So we need to get to that and also finish up the unit tests for these new defaults. And that's a lot of patches, as you can tell if you click on that link. But eventually, I think we expect to get all of those in Antelope and discover any API bugs and see if we can close out on them and have a solid secure RBAC that can ship with Antelope across the stack. And by that I mean this is the effort across different services as well. So The goal is if you whatever OpenStack service you're using, you should be able to start setting these new these config options and consuming the default RBAC that these services are working on right now. Yep. So that was my spiel. I went through it pretty quick, but I was hoping, like, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And of course, Vida later on if you want to add stuff. And there's Gansham, who's been leading this across the stack.
Joining a little late. I wanted to join early, but I was in Glance also discussing the RBAC at the same time.
Oh, I see. Oh, didn't realize.
Yeah.
That, but
so just to know, like I saw like you have updated the RBAC for phase 1, right? Dropping the scope and doing project reader. So that completes the phase 1 thing. I think the testing part you are discussing, and have any question on that or?
Well, we started merging some Tempest tests in the last cycle, and so we were looking to add more tests. I mean, we've created tests for about 5 resources, and there are like 15, right? So technically, just keep chipping away at those is the plan for the Antelope cycle.
So how you are changing? I have not looked into the patch. So you are adding the new test or migrating the existing test to the new default?
Oh, these are brand new. They have a new.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we spoke to you while we were making those changes, and Liron's been working with, he's been filing issues with Tempest and stuff as he was working on this.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to test even with the Tempest test also. So we have a target in Tempest also to moving the all our Tempest tests to the new defaults for master, and for stables where Tempest master is used, they continue test with the old defaults. So that's the like switching or flipping we have to do in Tempest. Once we do that, then maybe next cycle Manila can think of like moving the existing test also towards the project reader way.
Amazing. Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Apart from testing, I think we have we were discussing with in the NOAA and Glance also. I think you have discussed the flipping the flag at line 45, if I can see correctly. So like you are going to switch this to true, right?
That was going to be a question actually. So so that's our goal for Antelope, right? Or is it still for B?
No, for A it will be okay. So the thing is, we need to test it in a more integrated way. So what we decided in NOAA and Glance, and just like half an hour before, is we will I'll propose a Tempest full job by enabling these flags for NOAA, Neutron, Glance, where they have been implemented. And if everything works fine, because project reader roles should not break anything what we have existing users or test cases.
Yeah. So
if everything works fine, and then we decided to flip those flags for NOAA and Glance to true by default. And yeah, for Manila also, I think that can be the good way if we can flip those flags in Antelope. And like not sure like all the integrated gate for Manila, but if you wanted to test with the projects you are dependent or they are dependent on Manila, so that job you can start and see what all things are working or if anything is failing or not.
Makes sense. Okay, so I can follow what you're doing.
Yeah, and to flip the flag, I added the function in Yoga or maybe Z cycle in Oslo Policy. So you can override those flag defaults value to true for Manila only, how we did for JSON and YML. So that will be by default changing to true only for Manila, even though they are Oslo flag. And in Oslo, it will be default to false only for any other services.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll push for Nova or Glance once I finish my testing, and the same way you can do it for Manila.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to that patch and test it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for actually doing all the RBAC work on time. You really appreciate for Manila finishing that work for phase 1.
Awesome. Yep. All right. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you very much for the efforts from like everyone involved. Gotham for pushing on this, and also like to Sigo and like Ghanshyam for being here as well, discussing these topics with us. Also like Vida and Liron that have been working on these tests. And there's a mention on the chat as well, like from Ashley, and that's something we have been talking about. So as Gata mentioned, we have the test for 5 resources so far, and we would really like to get more resources being tested and more test set, but we know that it could be painful for like a single person to like write all of those tests, and so the idea is that we would have as we did in the past for like other efforts like OSC, implementing commands like OS for SC, or implementing new functional tests for SC. For those, when we saw that like there was a need and could be painful for only one person and take a lot of time, we would host a hackathon over the cycle, and we would have like a lot of hands together and trying to work on a few tests. So the idea is that we will have a hackathon for this, for the like implementing more secure back tests over this cycle, and we can like accelerate our like coverage, and we can have like more people working on this. The idea is that we will decide like the dates today, possibly. So I was willing to propose a date now, and let me see that. So it would possibly be like on close to milestone 1, I think, because it could be like closer to, or when people will have like less work, because feature freeze is like crunch time, and everybody will be working on features, and reviewers will have like a lot of things to review as well. So the idea is that would be something close to milestone 1, which is it's 1 month from now. Yeah, M1 would be from November 14th to November 18th. It could be something before milestone 2 as well, but yeah, the idea is that we would do it sooner, so we wouldn't get like everyone doing like in some time that everybody will be focused on their features and their like the reviews and getting changes in for feature freeze. So yeah, thanks for the scheduling. I had it open in another tab here, but yeah. So for me at least, milestone 1 sounds okay, because we are almost like 1 month away from that, and that would give us some time to prepare and also like talk about these in advance in the mailing list and the Manila list as well, and make people aware of that. And in my opinion, it would be good timing. So what do you think about that? Do you think we should like have it for milestone 2, or milestone 1 sounds great?
Carlos, I don't know if you can hear me. We
Yes, I
had
can.
audio issues earlier. Sorry. Yeah, I would vote for M1 timeframe, just so there's time to follow up and do the reviews.
Yep. That sounds good. That will give us some cycles to review, like a bunch of changes to. Yeah, good point, Felipe. November 15th, it's a holiday in Brazil, and we have a bunch of contributors there. But we could make the hackathon like not the entire week, for example. We could make it like 4 days or 3 days only. It would reduce the contribution window. But yeah, do you think we should use the entire week for that, or should we like a reduced contribution with the window would be good?
I'm okay keeping the week, but having like, the meetings earlier in the week so that, I have a feeling like we need to reprise the pair programming thing that we did a while ago.
Yeah.
And
Makes
then,
sense.
folks have the rest of the time to just submit 1 or 2 patches that they want to contribute.
Yeah, that sounds good. Maybe coming up with a Taiga board too, so we can
Yeah.
like divide the tasks.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And I think Vida already has a version of that we can turn into a Taiga board.
Cool.
Yeah, we have a list. We can turn it into Taiga board. I'll link it to you, Carlos, later. It's yeah.
Milestone 1 would be good. And okay, so milestone 1 sounds good then. I will propose a patch to the official release schedule, like usually at after the PTG. So we will have like some dates, and we will add like the bug squashes we will have, and also the hackathon for implementing more tests. Okay, so that's the part I wanted to bring up. Is there something else you would like to add to this topic?
Just one thing, I think we were discussing in QA. Vida brought up the Manila test question, I think, and we had to hard stop there. So Vida, is there any question like for me on test case, or everything is all clear now?
Yeah, Gancham, I just basically wanted to see if we were in sync with Manila and do a final inventory check to see if what has been merged is all that's needed.
Okay.
Or is there additional work that to be done? So basically syncing up with the Tempest efforts across the projects.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. If there's nothing else, it's a wrap, Carlos.
Great. Thank you very much for bringing this up, and thanks as well, Gansham, for joining us, and everybody for the efforts on Sakura back. Okay, next topic, we would have USC updates, but I think we are getting a bit tight with the schedule, so I will move it to later in the week, and we can proceed with the outreach internships. For this cycle, we intend to have 2 outreach internships, and we would like to talk about those during this PTG. So yeah, there are a few people to talk about those today, which are me and Gotham, and Ashley and Francesco. So Ashley and Francesco, would you like to start?
Hey, I'm not sure if Francesco is on the call, so I'll take lead on this.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
you are?
I am.
Hey.
Yeah, you can feel free to start this topic, and I can just say something in the middle.
Of course. Thanks. Sorry, I didn't see your name on the thing. So basically, what me and Francesco are wanting to do with our intern is to make a multi-node testing job with Ceph. Hopefully the intern can complete this task and we can use this kind of as a blueprint to make other multi-node testing jobs. I think this ties in really nicely with what Gotham was saying earlier with our CI. Maybe this can help mitigate those issues that he mentioned. We do have a couple people have emailed and messaged on the OpenStack Outreachy channel or the Manila channel. So we are seeing a lot of interest in this, which is really exciting. Basically, we'll just start off with deploying OpenStack with DevStack and then setting up a Ceph storage cluster, then learning about the Ceph daemons and working with Manila with Ceph, and then eventually hopefully getting these multi-node deployments up and running. So yeah, that's what we plan on doing. I'm really excited to work with Francesca on this.
Yeah, and if I can add just a bit on this project, we recently merged the Ceph ADM part in DevStack, which is a nice change. It's the same basically that is happening today in OOO. And Ceph ADM is the new tool of deploying Ceph in general. So we can get rid of dependencies like package management within DevStack, and it's easier because we can just pull the Ceph ADM version that we need from the stable branch, and we can bump the container up and deploy the version that we need. So we can create different combinations and we can get the fixes provided by the Ceph organization earlier by using those containers instead of just waiting all the packaging chain happening. So I think this is very useful. And as long as we have the first job, we can combine this metrics between Ceph and DevStack to have more stable jobs and test better our components. And yeah, that's what I had.
Yeah, this is a great project, and it will be like awesome to see an intern working on this. Thanks for proposing the project. It looks great, and I'm pretty sure you will both like do a good job because I know you're good mentors. So yeah, and if you are in this call and know someone that would be like interested on participating and like it's an outreachy applicant now and like it's been through the all of the process, like please let them know that this is a good project to work on. And also we have like another project which is from for Manila UI. In the past releases, our projects have been basically focused on the OSC, like the implementation of OSC commands and trying to get us like up to date with our native client for Manila. And that took some releases, but during the last release, we managed to achieve the feature parity we wanted so bad. So yeah, this is a great effort, but now it's time for us to get some love to Manila UI now. So it's another project we thought about, and we have been like willing to get some updates to Manila UI. In the past, we had like some interns working on this as well, but there's a long way to feature parity. For example, like we are currently on API version 273, and like there are some features from API version 249, for example, that is like share server management that isn't implemented. So we would like to get some of these features worked on, and would like to guide some interns to work on these features and learn a bit more about what Manila can do and some of the functionalities in Manila UI. So yeah, I talked a bit about this, but Gautam, would you like to share something?
No, you covered it. So hoping to find somebody that's got some UI experience to help us out with this for sure. Otherwise, we'll be happy to just make some progress on Manila UI because I think we've been pretty short staffed to do anything with Manila UI for many releases now, and it's just been keeping it maintained and stuff, and no new features. So it'll be cool to try and catch up on some of the feature work. This is an ambitious plan. We'll actually see how it ends up, but we probably have a template going forward if we get started on some things. Like for example, the last cycle we did some work with some interns from North Dakota State University, and we have like a decent template for doing shared network subnets. And that was one of those much anticipated features for people that do multiple subnets in multiple availability zones, and you're trying to do replication and so on, and you'd like to access all of this via the UI. So that figures in these plans as well to finish up that work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, the NDSU students, they have helped us a lot with brainstorming on what would be like some workflows for the shared network subnets, but the implementation still like missing some bits, as I mentioned. So yeah, it's another thing for them to work on. I think it's gonna be a good opportunity, and yeah, a good thing for us to have someone working on the Manila UI. Yeah, we have a couple of contenders already, like people are pinging us, asking for help, and interested in the project, which is good. And this is true not only for this project, but all of the 3 OpenStack projects that we saw were submitted. There are a couple of people interested, and there's some movement you can see like in OpenStack Manila, and there's another channel on OFTC, which is OpenStack Outreach, that people will often ask questions, or even like the mailing list. So yeah, it's good to see all of the movement around this, and people getting interested in these projects, and hopefully we will get some interns working on these amazing projects we have. So yeah, thank you for the updates. And let's hope for a successful outreach round. With that, if no one has something else to add, I think we are 10 minutes ahead because of the moving the topics and so on. So we could possibly go to the 10 minutes break, but only if there's nothing else to add and there aren't questions or something to bring up. Okay, so 10 minutes break it is. Let's get back at in 10 minutes time. I will add a timer here and I will stop the recording now. Okay, welcome back. Next topic is OpenStack SDK Manila status. So Ashley and Gotham, floor is yours.
Hey, great. So I brought attention to the OpenStack SDK, I think 2 cycles ago, maybe. And I think there were actually a few NDSU students who had picked up in progress patch as one of their contributions during their internship. So last cycle, the share group patch and the share snapshots patch merged, which is great, but the OpenStack SDK folks intend to close the branch that the current patches are still up on, which is the feature R1 branch. It's pretty easy to move that back to master. It's just a matter of rebasing. Currently, I think they're all in merge conflict. But I think that this effort, is a good candidate for an internship, especially for like a college capstone or a group project internship type. It's modular. You can have several people work on this without impeding each other's progress. So I think this effort would be best for that. I think there's a chance that the branch will close before we get another group of interns. So I'll probably pursue moving that back over to the master branch within the first milestone of Antelope. But that's pretty much the big status update that I wanted to give for this PTG. Gotham, is there anything else you wanted to bring attention to for this?
No, just that. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, restoring those patches, rebasing them, and getting them to run the functional test, right? A lot of those patches may not have run against the new CI changes.
Yeah.
So that will be a big thing. And of course, like, there's a lot of them, as you can see on the screen. Yeah, trying to get them in slowly will be our only goal, I think, for this cycle. There is going to be newer APIs, newer things that we have not yet figured here. There's a Taiga board with a bunch of patches that have been, I mean, a bunch of requirements that have not yet been, we've not groomed them, we've not started working on them. But getting the SDK closed out with these changes would be a big win for us in Antelope. And that goes without saying that we've been trying to put this effort over many cycles, but I mean, and it's intentional that we've actually spent as little time as we could on it, because we've had other priorities going on. We in the Manila team don't intend to replace the Manila client SDK anytime soon with the OpenStack SDK. But having code in the OpenStack SDK benefits other projects, benefits downstream consumers. I mean, a solid example of the projects that it benefits would include Nova, and they're working on their VertiOFS integration to use Manila shares, and they are looking to get the access rules interface working via the OpenStack SDK, because they don't want to pull in Manila client as a requirement, because they already have OpenStack SDK, so they might as well just use it if the code exists over there. So they're looking for it to land before the end of Antelope cycle. So stuff like that. I mean, for their use case, just access rules might suffice. But there could be other downstream consumers that are doing some kind of automation that don't want to use Manila client and want to use just one SDK across all of these OpenStack services. So there's a theme of this going on with OpenStack for a while now. I think on Friday there's going to be a design session with the OpenStack SDK / OpenStack CLI folks, and they're asking for feedback from operators. So if you're one of those downstream consumers or are interested in the upstream effort for this, feel free to join that talk. And I think we'll try to be there at least for a little bit to try and see, how we can advance these patches that have been pending here. And I can add a link on the notes there.
Yeah, this is something, I mean, OpenStack SDK, it's quite important. And I have compiled some results of the user survey for 2022. And spoiler alert, OpenStack SDK was one of the things that people talk about the most. Like we've had like 9 mentions or something like that of people requesting it like saying, okay, there should be more support for OpenStack SDK. So yeah, those like these changes, they are really valuable. And also, like, if we can give help to the Nova folks with regards to getting them the share access rules, APIs, or share access rules integration with OpenStack SDK, it would be nice. VirtualOFS is something that we have also like been talking about for some time, and the implementation is like people in Nova are looking for the implementation. So if we can like help them with this part and getting them to use something in the OpenStack SDK and do not import Manila client, it would be great. So yeah, thanks for the efforts on this. It's good to see like the progress we have so far. And the rebasing, yeah, as I mentioned, shouldn't be that complicated, but are we, if I understand correctly, we are getting some interns to work on this as well, like in a capstone project, for example. So we would have some people working on these, right?
That's the goal. And it's going, I think it's going to be NDSU. I need to check. But yeah, that's the goal. We are proposing this as a project for the for an upcoming internship with a college here in the US. But I mean, that said, this isn't limited to us trying to, you know, use internships and such to further this and things that just as you can tell, it takes a lot to do those mentorships and stuff like that. But if you're interested in consuming the OpenStack SDK, please come help us out. You know, if you know anybody that would like to exercise some Python skills, this would be a pretty cool project to work on. It is pretty independent of Manila, and you don't really need to know everything about Manila. You just need to read the API reference and add some Python code in the SDK to consume that API or expose that API. So it looks a lot different from working on Manila, right? Easier up ramp. So if anyone's interested here, that would be a most welcome.
Yes, indeed. And those are also like good tasks for people to, like if you have someone new to, or that you want to get to understand better, like the OpenStack coding patterns and get them up to date with like the OpenStack way to write code. This is also a good opportunity for newcomers. So, yep. Good. Thanks for the updates. Is there something else you would like to add?
Nothing from me.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, now we are a bit ahead of the schedule. So this started 16, and then now let's put it like 16. Yeah, next topic would be bandit testing and VMT. I think I can fit another topic at the end, which was DLC updates, if we can get to that. But yeah, floor is yours, Gotham.
Carlos, if we have the 20 minutes, do you want to cover the CLI updates? Because I think we may have Fungi or somebody joining from the security team because they're aware of this as being at 16:30.
Yep, sure. So let's do that. So there's a OSC updates. This won't take much time too. So yeah, let me add this here. So it's 16:10 to 16. It will take like 15 minutes. So let's say 25. 16. Okay. Right. 7. Right. So this is a topic that has become recurrent in the in our PTGs. Let me share the Etherpad with you. Become recurrent because we have been in an effort for this for quite a long time now. And now, we like last cycle, we managed to achieve. I like talked about this several times this week already, but yeah, we managed to achieve the feature parity we wanted so badly for a bunch of time. This was like Mari and mine topic, but yeah, Mari had some has some personal things going on that she needed to attend today, so she didn't make it to this meeting. But yeah, I can cover the updates for this. We have the task board here, which looks kind of different from what it was in the past, and that because we had a lot of things happening on the previous cycle, which are implementations to new commands and lots of things happening as well, like the functional test implementation. The board is basically reflecting what we have for tasks now. But yeah, there are like if we look at the done column, there are like 52 items, and we can see like the efforts and like people that worked with us like way in the past. So it's a good effort so far. And this is my moment to thank everyone that worked on this with reviews and proposed changes and so on. It was good. And we had one successful internship over the last release, which was like Franca had worked with us, and she basically implemented a few more commands that were left for us to reach feature parity. And also like I mean, we did that, managed to get everything in at the end of the cycle. So yeah, it was huge. There are still some missing functional tests for the share server migration commands, and also there are a few other like in the Kanban board, still like from the hackathon. But from the hackathon, I mean, if we filter by the amount of changes open, there are only 3, like 2 are in merge conflict. And thanks Ashley for pushing again the change for testing snapshot instances, like rebasing it. I can get back to that. But if we look at the actual number of changes proposed, like the number of changes merged over the last cycle hackathon, it was like huge. So it was a great effort from us to implement all of these functional tests and have everything going on like as we expected. It was actually, I think, better than I expected, and we had like more changes than I expected it would be merged. So yeah, it's awesome to see all of like this list of changes with this green text saying merged. It says that we did like a good amount of testing, and we added a bunch of test cases. We currently have only like more positive test cases, but the negative ones we can talk about in the future, and this will like possibly or like already become a requirement. More to that like at the end. I mean, we have been talking about the implementations and what we should propose and what are the expectations when you come to a feature freeze. Like I'm working on a feature and I want to get the feature in. What should I have implemented? So I mean, we kind of know a bit of the rules, which are getting the API working and reviewed, and the Tempest tests, and also like the Manila client or OSC. And now OSC, it's like a requirement for us. It's not anymore, but more to that. I added some bullets here to talk about that too. So yeah, we can see that the hackathon we hosted in the last cycle was a success. So it's great to see the work we did, and also great to see that. I mean, there's only a few things missing, so we can reach feature parity, which are not feature parity, sorry, but for us to add the deprecation warning and say and say, okay, we will deprecate the native Manila client in a couple of releases. Yeah, please start using the OSC because, so yeah. And as I said, Frank did an amazing work in the internship last cycle, but for this cycle, we don't intend to have an intern working on OSC properly. We could have like interns working on various other fronts, like the outreach ones would from Manila, and like that relates to Manila would be the CI ones that Ashley and Francesco are proposing, and the Manila UI one that me and Gautam are proposing. So yeah, for this cycle, we don't intend to have an intern to work on OSC, which is it's the end of an era, I would say. We had so many interns working on OSC, but it's great to see how much effort they put on this, and how far we've got only with like the help of the with the interns, and also like the past hackathons where we had people working together. I think it was like one of the most exciting things I participated, like the hackathon we had for implementing the functionalities. I was like, everybody was so excited, and also for the functional tests. So yeah, but now all to that effort, the thing is that we will need at some point to add some more functional tests for like the negative cases, which we can think about like in this release or the next one. But the effort it's good. It's been great so far, but we could direct like some intern help for like to another front. So, but what we still need to get, oh, here I said feature parity, but it's not feature parity, actually. It's, how can I say that? It's, we can like claim it full support. So to claim full support, we would need to get the version auto negotiation thing, which is something that is already like kind of in progress, and there is one batch already proposed for this. And thanks, Gautam, for taking a look at that. And I think that there were some hints of.
It's not done yet. Like
Yeah.
technically, we got distracted at the end of the last cycle, which is kind of one of the reasons why we didn't put a deprecation warning on Manila client, because I know Maurice is in the room, and he asked specifically, that OSC is unusable for him until we have the auto negotiation stuff working. Otherwise, it takes a while. It takes things on the user's part to set to be able to use the OSC stuff. So yeah, that's a pretty big target for Antelope.
Yep. So that's the missing bit for us. I mean, so we can actually say, okay, here's the deprecation warning, and we would introduce the deprecation warning and say, and tell administrators that, or tell users that the Manila client's gonna be deprecated, and that OSC is the tool that should be used now. Because of all of the reasons we talked about all of this this year, like it's better because like people will be able to choose only the OpenStack client and so on, and there that they wouldn't need to switch like context from like the Manila native clients to the OpenStack client. And yeah, that's something we managed to achieve, and we have the feature parity for that. And the only missing bit is the version auto negotiation, which is something that we can definitely take a look at the Antelope cycle. So the timeline for some notes from the last PTG, and it combines with something I was saying earlier. Like if you're implementing a change to the client, now the mandatory thing would be OSC, I would say, and Manila client implementation would be optional. If you want to implement Manila client, okay, it's optional, but OSC would be the mandatory one. And the functional tests and unit tests could come together with OSC as well. So yeah, that will be like a factor in feature freeze as well. Possibly should update some documentations there, so we can make it clear in the documentations and so on. But yeah, it's kind of good to say this, because it means that we got to a good state with this, and that we are like able to say, okay, now you need to implement things to OSC, and Manila client, it's not like the focus, the place you should be focusing your efforts on, like implementing something. So yeah, that's another note, and I just wanted to highlight this again. If you are working on a feature for this cycle, please, and you are like touching the client, please do the changes for OSC, because those are the mandatory now, not the other way around as used to be, like the Manila client being the mandatory implementation. So for timelines, we have from like Surila to A release. Yeah, it should shift now, but from A to B now. So some of these things will fall under like the A to B. So as the micro version auto negotiation and some bug fixes, no new features for the Manila client shell now should be here as well. And deprecating the Manila shell V1 and V2, I think that could be one thing as well, but I think we could have the version auto negotiation, and then we can think about that. I don't know if that might not like relate so the one thing with the other, but yeah, that's something we can take a look at, like during this release to the next one. And the documentation updates for commands, yes, they would be like useful, I would say. But I don't know if we want to start touching this before we have like the deprecation warning. And but if we say we have feature parity, we may be look into those now. And one thing is that I mean, it could be painful to write like the entire documentation for this, because it's a lot of comments. So if we have like an automated way to do this, it would be great. I know there was some tooling for generating like some other sorts of documentation in the past. I don't know if it worked for this as well, because it was broken since like before I even joined Manila. So I don't know if that used to work for like documentations for Manila or Manila client RC as well, or if there is something that we will need to do too. But yeah, and the clarification here, it's we already like made that clear that we are not deprecating the Manila client SDK. And if we get the micro version auto negotiation now, we would be able to already like add the deprecation warning this release, and we could say like from the B to C release that we would be deprecating the Manila client. That would give like two releases notice. But if this is a tick release, yeah, we should possibly do this in the next tick, just to try to align like with those things as well. So yeah, I think that would be one thing to align with. So yeah, that's the thoughts, and that's the things I would like to share on the OSC updates. It's been great to see everything getting merged and all of these features getting in, and all of the effort people made so we could get at this point. And yeah, there are a few bits for us just to say, okay, use the OSC, and we can already start like saying that Manila client's gonna get deprecated at some point. So yeah, that's pretty much me. That's pretty much this updates for DOSC. Do you have like questions or concerns or something you'd like to add? Okay, I'll take silence as a no. So yeah, I think that yeah, the bandit testing was supposed to be 16:30, right? And I pushed here to 25. If you want to, we can make it like 16:30, so we can give like people the time to join. So we could have like a short break until 16:30, and we would be back to discuss the bandit testing or VMT. What does it sound?
Sounds great.
Awesome. So yeah, let's do that. We will be back at 16:30. I'm recording. All right. So for the last topic of the day, we have bandit testing VM/VMT. So Pratham, would you like to? Yep, floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Carlos. All right. Yeah, here's the Etherpad. Thanks for showing it. Yep. Let's get started with what the status is right now. So the VMT is the vulnerability management team. So if you're an OpenStack operator, you may have been in touch with the OpenStack VMT in the past to report any security issues when it comes to OpenStack. Well, if you're a contributor that's contributing to OpenStack and to Manila, for instance, you must know there is a vulnerability management process. That is, that if you have issues that you deem are could be security issues, that somebody could take advantage of something in your system because there's something wrong that's happening in the code, whether it's a dependency for Manila or a third-party integration, or if it's in the code in Manila itself, you would be benefited if you actually opened that issue as a private security issue, right? That's at least the process that that we'd like, so that a small number of people can work with you to triage that particular bug and to actually determine if it's a vulnerability in the code base that we can help fix. And so that's been and that process has been pretty loose for the past 7 or odd years of Manila's existence. And that's because there's been a parallel effort in the OpenStack space, which is called the vulnerability management team, and it's a group of individuals who are interested to help maintain the security code, the security integrity of all software that ships as OpenStack. And initially, the VMT had basically any project that had graduated at that time, and that is kind of the reason that Manila was not included in that list, because we were still going through the graduation process, and this was the days before the big tent and so on. So but ever since, we've kind of we've definitely still worked with the VMT on many things, and we've learned a lot about the process from them. And for instance, there are a bunch of these CVEs that are listed on the Etherpad, and those CVEs, a couple of them at least, have gone through the VMT process, just for us as contributors to do things the right way, and to get everybody involved and have a vulnerability disclosed in the most responsible manner possible. And if you want the long and short of how this whole process works, there are links out of this Etherpad that will take you and explain the documentation, explain this stuff to documentation better than I can. But one of the pressing questions that we had as we were working through these issues is that Manila's code is still not under the VMT. And that feels a little bit of a procedural thing for me, more than the fact that there's something wrong with the code, right? So, and what are the advantages we gain by having our code under the VMT? Well, the biggest advantage for me would be having the oversight of folks that have dabbled a lot more into security and are way more aware of these processes, because more than once have we actually had a bug be reported public when it ought to be reported as a private security bug. And once it's public, there isn't much we can dial back, right? So discussions happen publicly and patch, and there are no way for if, especially if it's a day zero bug or something, um, uh, we basically give ourselves a gap of time between having a fix and somebody being able to exploit that vulnerability in the code. And so that's something we want to avoid. And the VMT is staffed with people that that actually are knowledgeable about all of these and have had that kind of networks that have been very useful for us in the past. So whether it is talking to all of the downstream distributors of the code, or getting in touch with MITRE or NIST, and having our vulnerability recorded and assessed, and a score assigned, etc. There is quite a lot of goodness in that the VMT brings to OpenStack, and they also have a pretty good triage process and rules of thumb for different kinds of bugs that we could classify and processes beyond a CVE, right? So they have the OpenStack security advisories, security notes, and things. These could be very helpful for operators that are using Manila in their clouds. And for many, as they have told us in the past operator sessions, being part of the VMT is pretty important to them, because they know that this code it follows the same rules as the rest of the code that they're using from the OpenStack repositories. So those are some of the advantages of being in the VMT. And if you probably look through the docs and the past notes on this, you'll realize it benefits us and doesn't take much from us if we actually have the VMT's oversight over Manila's private bug triage process. The VMT, of course, has some requirements for a project to join. And I was talking to Fungi on a different channel and explained to him that I'd just like to take the community through those so that we can have awareness as to what this process is. And they are listed under the requirements linked out of that on line 23. And there are about 8 requirements for this for any code to be put under VMT. And if you scroll up on this page, you will see that not all of the OpenStack code is covered by VMT. Even within projects that you're aware of, maybe only a couple of repos are covered, whereas some others are not, etc. So it goes to each project team to make sure that all of their code is submitted and assessed the same way. And so we'd like to do this right with Manila. So requirement 1 says that basically we should not be taking more than 90 days to unembargo any bug. So that's like a pledge we take. Don't exceed 90 days. Don't test the patience of the reporter. And the requirement 2 is that the VMT will not track or issue advisories for external software components. This is critically important for Manila because of our third-party integrations. So it may not just be it may not just be the third-party proprietary software and hardware that we integrate with. It could also be the upstream libraries that we consume that are open source. But the VMT, if it sees that a bug originates somewhere else, maybe we are consuming Paramiko, and Paramiko has some bug, will not really track or issue any advisories for such bugs. And requirement 3 is that there are only Manila stable branches, things that we are still actively shipping and maintaining, are under the VMT. So the main branch is not. So the active development branch, if you're reporting vulnerabilities against it, it's not really going to be under their purview. And so are the extended maintenance branches. So we keep transitioning branches into extended maintenance, and if there are security issues, we'll do our best effort to fix those security issues. But unless the security issue exists in a stable branch that we maintain and actively ship, uh, it's not really under the purview of the VMT, and it'll be up to the Manila team to do whatever fixes. And the fourth requirement is that any private bug first be visible to the VMT so that they can vet it, they can give their first initial opinion, and then pull in anybody from the Manila uh, team onto it. And this has actually proved to be pretty cool because in the past, there have been folks that have reported bugs that are even private to us, that are administrators on Launchpad and stuff, and the security team has reached out to one or two of us to pull us in and get us onto this issue. So I don't see a problem with this requirement as such. Uh, and like I said, I mean, it is in their interest to keep issues responded to pretty quickly, and the embargo limit under 90 days. So they do have a pretty good turnaround, is my hope and my belief. And requirement 5 is to have liaisons that are less than the Manila core team, right? Like, so the core team can be 10 individuals, but we can't really have everyone, under the, be able to look at the security issues right away, at least. The deal with security issues is always need to know. So do you really need to know this information to effectively assist in its closure? And that kind of enhances the security process. So while it's not exclusionary, the need for a smaller team is so that we can be we can keep the circle of trust a little smaller around potentially dangerous security flaws until they're fixed. And yeah, so we have a core sec team that has exactly 5 individuals. That's what the VMT wants. And we need a security liaison out of those 5, and I like the aspect of it having duplicity. So basically, like, if I'm not available, Carlos is kind of a thing. So we'll nominate a couple of security liaisons, satisfying point 6 as well. Requirement 7 says that we have to have the OpenStack PTI, and a PTI is a project testing interface. And that really dumbed down is that we use talks to run all of our testing, and everything else is automated under talks. And so Bandit, for instance, something that we'll discuss in a couple of minutes, should also be under that. And this is something that the security team should be able to run to be able to verify a vulnerability that somebody has reported, etc. And so that, I think, is an automatic check mark for any Manila repository. And the last requirement is that and it is more of a thing that's encouraged and not really a requirement, is that we undertake a review of the code. And for this is where I really need expertise in the community. So if you've ever had any experience, with looking at code vulnerabilities, you could be, really useful in this space, and by helping us undertake a review of the Manila architecture, the Manila code, and perform some sort of a threat analysis that would help us identify areas that need security hardening, or that would be extremely helpful to deployers that want to make sure that they're doing things the right way. And I think, I mean, with the VMT, we get some of that expertise. And I was just asking out loud if we need that we need help here. And of course, there aren't great threat analyses done on all of OpenStack software. So I'm not holding my breath, but at the same time, there are folks that actually do this routinely and report security bugs to us today. So I'm hoping that continues. We've recently been part of a security threat analysis, and we have a bunch of bugs right now that we're actually talking through and explaining ourselves for. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So from what I hear from Jeremy, we are good on all of these 8 requirements, and they have no issues, including Manila, because I have a feeling they always treated us the same as any other project, except that just keep telling us that we ought to formally interact with them and have a security liaison assigned. So we'll do that now and have ourselves be under the VMT. And probably if you're an operator, you'll probably be happy. We're finally getting to this, and we should have done this a while ago. That's pretty much that about the VMT. Any questions before I move on to another thing in the same topic?
Not from my side.
Awesome. One of the things can be that you will not see these security bugs being discussed in our bug triage week after week, and until they're ready for disclosure. And they're typically ready for disclosure after we probably have a patch for them. So that's it works a little backwards in this case, that somebody reports a private bug, folks know about it and try to patch the bug, and then we keep patches ready for all affected branches before we disclose the bug and the vulnerability, whether it is through an OSSN or an OSSA or even through a CVE, or just a security hardening opportunity. We have this disclosure process that could last a few days to even up to 90 days, right? So if you're a bug reporter, please be aware of this. If you are a regular contributor, please be aware of this, because it isn't the right audience if you're pulled into a security bug to discuss it publicly until we're ready for the disclosure. Awesome. All right. If there are no questions, let's move on to the last part, Bandit. Well, you might have heard of this if you've worked on any other OpenStack project repository. And the issue here is that we're not running it against the Manila repos. And so we just started, experimenting with it last week. And as you can see, the numbers are not great, but I don't know what they are. Is the point. A lot of them in other projects have actually been ignored. Some of these, like for example, we are doing an exec, but this exec is happening inside code that's not really accessible to an external entity in any way. So that can be classified as a known, and secure exchange, even if the act of doing the exec is not considered safe. So that's a sort of thing. So we've got to probably comb through these issues as it suggests by severity. There are 5 issues that we've got to address, and we might have to tag them as ignore these security issues because we are well aware that we are using SHA-1. And we know that SHA-256 is what is the nearest better replacement for this, but we are using this in a particular constrained context where we're not using it for generating cryptographic hashes. We're rather using it to do some data validation and stuff, which is acceptable for use per the FIP standards too. So that's sort of a thing. So we might be able to just tag them but deliberately do so and address those issues. And I haven't run Bandit myself against Nova or Cinder or Ironic or something. The other projects, just to kind of see where what kind of issues you hit with those. But Bandit does fail when you have issues that have high and you've not really tag them in the code. And the way you tag them is you have this tag that says no sec, which means don't run any security check. I mean, or rather, don't alert me on security issues on this particular line of code. And that should be able to weed out any false positives that Bandit has. Some of the OpenStack services just go ahead and blanket ignore some Bandit checks, and that is deliberate again, based on what the project or the code is trying to do. But not all of them do any do these wide ignores. So we have to probably audit that and see this. So you might start seeing patches from me in the next few weeks, addressing some of these security issues and adding Bandit testing to our gates across the repositories. Mainly three: Manila UI, Manila, and Python Manila client.
Awesome. Thank you for picking it up. And also thank you for like offering to be like the Manila liaison for the vulnerability managing. Yep. So it's great if we like are added there, and yeah, I don't have any concerns with us being there, and this with that part where like they would be the first ones notified, because we have that in the past. We had that in the past, as you mentioned. So yeah, it's cool. And for Bandit, would I don't know how the other projects do this, but they have a different job for this. Like it's something that they inherited from, or it's like a different job. The similar their run time would be similar like to Pep8, for example, or something.
Yeah, it is pretty fast. It's static code analysis, so it is pretty fast, pretty much like Pep8. Does not run through, does not run even as fast as long as our unit tests, right? So some of them have, I mean, there is a bandit target, but they end up running this as part of Pep8. They don't create a new job because it runs pretty fast. So we can decide. We can either have another job or run it as part of Pep8 as well. But it is imperative to have another target, so that when folks want to run this locally, they just run the bandit tests if required.
Yeah, sure. That would be good indeed. Right. I think that's the question I had.
If you're, I mean, if someone here is interested to help fix any of these issues, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to, tag team with you.
Let me see if I got correctly. So you run this bandit. I didn't know about this library, and the output is showing this link, right? So the idea is to pass through those points and find if I can fix any of them. So like if I think that's something is high and has some importance, I can work on this. And then you probably rerun again, or do you have a plan of adding some job or something to validate that's now it's passing? How would we work on this?
Yeah, so you're right. Like if we want to distribute the work, we would first write a non-voting target with Bandit, maybe a different job, and just keep that job non-voting until we fix all the issues. And yeah, technically, because you have that target in the docs file in Manila's repository itself, you can run this locally too, and you can see the results, and then fix your code even before it hits Gerrit. But if it hit Gerrit, this non-voting job can be telling us what's going on for a while until we fix all these issues, and then we can flip it to voting, or like we were just chatting, we can push this as part of our Pep8 job. Finish Pep8, finish Doc8, finish bash 8 and then do bandit. We'll just be overloading a job that's not doing much, that's not spending too much time doing our testing anyway.
I got it. Thank you. I try to see if I can help fix some of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Felipe.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
I'm going through the list of issues on that gist you share, Gotham. First of all, it's a nice job. I was not aware of this project, and well, that we have so many issues in our code base. And I guess the second question would be, okay, there is a lot of work to do. So I assume we want to work on this as a community, right? How shall we track the work? Like, shall we create a couple of trackers for this, a couple of bugs reports, a blueprint? Like, I don't know if you thought about that.
Good point. I actually added Bandit as a blueprint, but you're right. Like, it's the sort of thing that we could spawn off into multiple bugs. And if we were to pick up, we could all just be partially implementing this blueprint, but fixing one of those bugs, right? So
Yeah.
that's the blueprint. And I'm just
Right there,
adding
like
it.
for instance, in the screen, I see there is one issue in PowerMax, for instance, in the DLMC driver. So I imagine, somebody that has knowledge of that driver to actually contribute with a fix for that. Others may be agnostic, so anybody could take it. But well, it's pretty common that volunteers won't take on stuff if there is no clear definition of the scope. So that's my question. That's where my question comes from, actually.
Agreed. Yeah. So if we were to break it down and actually file a bug against PowerMax in this case, yeah, that we would be able to explain to the PowerMax maintainers what is the change required.
Right. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So maybe that could be a nice task to do at some point in the Antelope cycle, to try to brainstorm, like go over the list of things we have and try to classify and create some trackers, like maybe one bug per or one blueprint to cover them all is too broad, and one bug per issue is definitely too specific. But maybe if we can classify depending on drivers or components, or I don't know, issue in particular, maybe we can come up with a good trade-off. And yeah, we can definitely do it as a team.
They're really lovely. Yes. I'm taking those as action items and totally agree.
Yes, as the OpenStack client and the OpenStack SDK, this one seems, quite large to be, complete in just one cycle, or just, a couple of fixes. That seems that, organizing the material, the content that we need to fix is going to help in the long term.
Awesome. Thanks, Victoria.
I have more one doubt. Is just to fix the high, the confidence high and severity high, or we should look at the median, low, and defining we don't have any, but just focus on high is the goal, or we should pass through all of them?
I think we'd be good to pass through all of them. And I'm trying to see if, I think Bandit will stop complaining if you don't fix, low issues, for instance, or medium issues. It only cares about the high issues that you have to address, which is what it targets as a failure. So I can check what the other projects have. I'm pretty sure there is going to be some low issues that we might just ignore at the end of the day.
Yeah,
but
because I was looking
yeah.
at the list, and there is a complaint about the part of the NetApp code, driver code, and saying that it's a hard-coded password, but it's not hard-coded password. We just call it as we call it a const as password and say it and set as a hard-code name, but it's not a password. You know,
I see.
The name of the variable doesn't mean that this is a actual password. You know, so it's a misunderstanding from the
Yeah.
bandit. So it's kind of thing I think we should skip.
Yeah, totally. And is that a high issue?
No, it's low, and
Okay.
median confidence. Confidence is a median, and severity it's low.
Okay. Yeah, so that's where probably a no-sec line would help. Because it's static code analysis, it's got to have some regex that's, capturing something like that and calling it a security flaw. So we just add an annotation at the end of that line saying no sec, and it should skip that line.
Or we can skip we have like skipping the specific bandit check, right?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, true. That's another option, but that gets skipped across all of the repos, I think. Like, sorry, all of the code, and that might be the. Oh, you mean within that line, no sec, that particular bandit check?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that might be an option. Yeah, I haven't explored that, but that could be an option. That makes more sense.
Okay.
And I'm looking at Cinder's output from one of the CI jobs. They have 131 low issues by severity and about 53 medium issues by severity. And the confidence one is always going to tell you a lot more. And so they have 180 as their confidence score issues, but the job doesn't fail. So stuff like that, right? Like, so technically, they have probably vetted through the code and seen that, what's clearly a vulnerability has been targeted and closed.
Cool.
All right. Any other concerns, comments? So I'll follow up on these action items and probably get in touch again during one of the weekly meetings. And thanks for the help, Felipe, for the suggestions, Victoria, and for any other help on this regard.
Yeah, sure. Let's make it happen collaboratively. Okay, so thanks for sharing this, and yeah, this is all good information, and yeah, you brought it up with me, like the bandit testing and the like vulnerability management thing a couple of weeks ago, but the bandit I also didn't know that existed. So yeah, thanks. It's good, and it helps to like make people generally aware that this exists, and there's a good tool for us to add, and we could like simply add some tests. So yeah, awesome. So we are 4 minutes over the hour already, but yeah, let's. It was a good, productive day at the PTG. Tomorrow we will have the first hour we'll have like some topics, and the second hour of the PTG will have the operator hour. So yeah, I'll be glad to have you there in the operator hour. I also intend to share some details about the user survey we had for 2022. So yeah, please join us tomorrow, and yep. So I think that's our wrap for today. I'll stop the recording now.